3 years ago, and every once in a while you sort of feel the presence, but I don't know whether that's just because you...
Clint Eastwood, a name that resonates like the sharp crack of a six-shooter in the barren wilderness of the cinematic frontier. A man who, for decades, has stood as the very embodiment of rugged masculinity, stoic resolve, and unflinching grit. But behind the steely gaze, the iconic squint, and the weathered face of America's last great cowboy lies a tapestry of contradictions, buried scandals, and one particular film, a singular moment in his storied career that Eastwood has spent over half a century refusing to look back upon. This is the dramatic story of Clint Eastwood's rise, his complicated personal life, and the film he has spent a lifetime trying to forget. Born on May 31st, 1930, in the bustling city of San Francisco, California, Clinton Eastwood Jr. came into the world amidst the punishing grip of the Great Depression. Economic hardship wasn't a distant concept for the Eastwood family. It was a daily reality. Clint's father, tirelessly chasing work across California, uprooted the family often, and it was in those formative years of constant motion and financial uncertainty that young Clint forged the quiet, unyielding resilience that would one day define both his on-screen characters and his off-screen persona. After graduating from high school, Eastwood's early adult years read like a blueprint for the archetypal American drifter, a young man chasing paychecks wherever he could find them. Unafraid of blistered hands or long, grueling hours, he worked as a lumberjack in the damp, pine-scented forests of the Pacific Northwest, scaling trees and felling timber in a world where a single misstep could mean a crushed limb or worse. When the logging camps thinned out, he took a job as a steel worker, laboring under a sweltering California sun. He manned gas stations, hauled hay bales, and even dug swimming pools in the heat of the summer months. Each job was as punishing as the last, and though Eastwood rarely spoke about these years with sentimentality, they left a mark on him. The unglamorous grind instilled in him a deep sense of resilience, a practical independence, and a no-nonsense attitude toward work that would carry over into his Hollywood career. On film sets, Eastwood would later be known for his economy of movement, his insistence on minimal takes, and his quiet, workmanlike leadership, qualities born from those early years of honest labor. Then came the Korean War. In 1951, Eastwood was drafted into the United States Army. He was sent to Fort Ord, California, not as a combat soldier, but assigned duties as a swimming instructor and lifeguard. Ironically, it was this seemingly mundane assignment that would change the trajectory of his life. Fort Ord was a hub for aspiring actors and entertainment hopefuls performing in military training films and base theater production. Through casual conversations and shared assignments, Eastwood began mingling with young men and women bitten by the Hollywood bug. One of his fellow soldiers recognized Eastwood's striking appearance, the towering frame, square jawline, and intense stare, and suggested he consider acting once his service ended. The idea lodged in Eastwood's mind. It wasn't something he actively pursued during his time in uniform, but it lingered there, quietly gestating. By the time he left the Army, the notion of a life in film no longer seemed quite so far-fetched. Without those chance encounters at Fort Ord, the legend of Clint Eastwood might never have been written. Fate soon intervened, and by the late 1950s, Eastwood landed his first significant role as Rowdy Yates in Rawhide, a popular television western that quickly found favor with American audiences. Initially cast as a secondary character, Eastwood's tall, commanding presence and unmistakable charisma rapidly propelled him to fan-favorite status. Rawhide proved more than just a steady paycheck. It became the launchpad for a career that would eventually redefine not just westerns, but American cinema itself. But it was a fateful collaboration with Italian director Sergio Leone in the early 1960s that would forever alter the trajectory of Eastwood's life. Cast as the enigmatic silent gunslinger in A Fistful of Dollars, 1964, For a Few Dollars More, 1965, and The Immortal, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966, Eastwood became the face of the so-called spaghetti western. These films didn't merely entertain, they revolutionized a genre. With his weathered features, taciturn manner, and iconic poncho, Eastwood's Man with No Name became an international symbol of cool detachment and brutal efficiency. The morally ambiguous anti-hero was reborn, and Eastwood was its living embodiment. As the 1970s dawned, Eastwood sought to stretch beyond the narrow confines of his Western image. It was during this time that he took on the role of Inspector Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry, 1971, a no-nonsense, gun-toting cop operating in a decaying San Francisco plagued by crime and corruption. Callahan's brand of justice was swift, merciless, and often bypassed conventional legal systems, a fact that stirred controversy but resonated with audiences disillusioned by rising crime rates and a faltering justice system. The now famous line, "Go ahead, make my day," would become an indelible part of American pop culture. In Callahan, Eastwood forged a character that symbolized both the toughness of traditional masculinity and the troubling complexities of vigilante justice. But Eastwood wasn't content to remain solely in front of the camera. With Play Misty, For Me, 1971, he made his directorial debut, proving he wasn't just a performer. He was a filmmaker with a distinct voice. In the years to follow, Eastwood helmed a broad and ambitious range of projects. The eerie High Plains Drifter, 1973, the poetic Pale Rider, 1985, the tender The Bridges of Madison County, 1995, and the searing, revisionist Western Unforgiven, 1992, which earned him Academy Awards for both Best Picture and Best Director. His creative bravery was unmatched. Eastwood even dared to tell the story of World War II's Battle of Iwo Jima from the Japanese perspective. In Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006, a deeply empathetic and critically lauded film. Even into his later years, Eastwood remained astonishingly prolific with Gran Torino, 2008, American Sniper, 2014, Sully, 2016, and The Mule, 2018. His minimalist, efficient shooting style, favoring natural lighting and sparse takes, became legendary. And yet, within this vast, celebrated filmography lies a single project that Eastwood has spent a lifetime dodging: Two Mules for Sister Sarah, 1970. A Western adventure co-starring Shirley MacLaine, the film, on paper, seemed tailor-made for Eastwood's brand. Set against the backdrop of the French intervention in Mexico, it told the story of Hogan, a cynical mercenary who rescues a seemingly innocent nun, Sister Sarah, played by MacLaine. Together, they traverse a treacherous wilderness, encountering danger, revolutionaries, and secrets along the way. But from the moment production began, Eastwood reportedly felt a growing sense of unease. The trouble stemmed primarily from his co-star. Shirley MacLaine, renowned for her outspoken nature and hands-on approach to acting, clashed sharply with Eastwood's famously laid-back, instinctual style. Where Eastwood relied on stoic expressions and minimal dialogue, MacLaine was theatrical, assertive, and frequently challenged director Don Siegel's choices. Their working relationship rapidly deteriorated, and Eastwood would later describe it as one of the most unpleasant professional experiences of his career. Creative friction wasn't the only issue plaguing the set of Two Mules for Sister Sarah. At its heart, Eastwood grew increasingly disillusioned with the film's tone, structure, and narrative direction. The movie's attempt to juggle classic Western tropes with oddball humor and whimsical intrigue felt like an ill-fitting patchwork to Eastwood's sensibilities. He had made his name through characters who were laconic, lethal, and lived by a personal code in a world bereft of easy answers. The blending of light-hearted comedy with the brutal world of frontier mercenaries and revolutionaries struck him as jarring, even unserious. What frustrated Eastwood most was how this tonal inconsistency diluted the film's emotional weight. He believed Westerns were at their best when stripped down to their elemental themes: survival, vengeance, loyalty, and the moral cost of violence. The Man with No Name didn't crack jokes. Harry Callahan didn't wink at the audience. And yet, here was Two Mules for Sister Sarah, asking Eastwood to deliver quippy lines alongside comic relief sequences involving drunken soldiers and mistaken identity. The film's so-called big twist, revealing that Shirley MacLaine's character, Sister Sarah, was in fact a prostitute posing as a nun, struck Eastwood as a lazy narrative device. To him, it was a gimmick that undermined any real sense of danger, trust, or emotional stakes between the characters. What could have been a fraught, complex relationship between a hardened mercenary and a woman hiding from both her past and her would-be captors was instead reduced to a plot twist better suited for lightweight entertainment than a serious frontier drama. It didn't help that MacLaine herself was fiercely opinionated about her role and the film's tone, often clashing with both Eastwood and director Don Siegel. Where Eastwood preferred instinctual, minimalist performances, MacLaine brought theatricality and sharp comedic timing. Traits Eastwood felt undercut the grit and fatalism the story demanded. In hindsight, Two Mules for Sister Sarah became a glaring example of what Clint Eastwood didn't want from his career. It wasn't just the tonal awkwardness or the difficult collaboration with his co-star. It was a deeper, more personal revelation about the kind of artist he was becoming. The experience underscored for Eastwood the absolute necessity of maintaining creative control, of safeguarding the integrity of a story's mood and message, and of refusing to dilute character-driven narratives for the sake of mass appeal or studio interference. This lesson would shape Eastwood's philosophy as a director for decades to come. He began to realize that great cinema wasn't made by compromise or by committee, but by filmmakers who trusted their instincts and fought for their vision. In Two Mules for Sister Sarah, he saw firsthand what happened when a film tried to please too many masters, blending hard-edged Western drama with slapstick humor and contrived plot twists. The result, for Eastwood, was a story that rang hollow, characters that felt insincere, and a film that failed to linger in the hearts of its audience. It wasn't long before Eastwood took matters into his own hands. By 1973, with High Plains Drifter, he stepped behind the camera to direct one of the bleakest, most unconventional westerns of its era, a ghostly, near-supernatural revenge tale where justice was cruel and morality nearly extinct. Here was the tonal consistency and narrative control Eastwood had craved. The film's stark minimalism, grim violence, and cynical worldview reflected not just the Western tradition he respected, but his own maturing worldview. That was followed by The Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976, a project Eastwood famously wrested away from its original director to helm himself. The film, deeply personal and thematically rich, became a landmark in revisionist Western cinema and a testament to Eastwood's belief in authorship over mere participation. No longer content to be a hired gun, Eastwood had transformed into a full-fledged auteur, a man determined to tell stories on his own terms, in his own voice. Two Mules for Sister Sarah remained the cautionary tale that made it all possible. Beyond personal dissatisfaction, Two Mules for Sister Sarah symbolized a transitional and uneasy chapter in Eastwood's career, a time when he was still beholden to studios and directors who, in his view, didn't fully grasp his emerging potential. Though Eastwood had already achieved international fame through the Dollars trilogy, Hollywood remained hesitant to give him the creative freedom he craved. He was still seen by many as a reliable hired gun, a capable leading man who could deliver box office success but not yet trusted to steer the artistic ship. That tension simmered beneath the surface during the making of Two Mules for Sister Sarah. The film became a microcosm of Eastwood's frustration with a system designed to control stars rather than collaborate with them. He was forced to navigate clashing egos, studio expectations, and creative decisions he neither agreed with nor could fully influence. It was a stark reminder that, despite his growing stardom, he was still playing by other people's rules. But Clint Eastwood was quietly watching, learning, and biding his time. On set, he paid close attention to the choices Don Siegel made as a director, where he placed the camera, how he staged scenes, and how he managed actors. Eastwood respected Siegel's craftsmanship, but also recognized where he would have done things differently. These moments, both of admiration and of silent dissent, planted the seeds for Eastwood's future as a filmmaker. By the time High Plains Drifter arrived in 1973, Eastwood had begun to assert himself not just as a performer, but as a director with a distinct voice. The film was darker, edgier, and far more morally complex than his previous Western, a direct rebuke to the lighter, more comedic tone of Two Mules for Sister Sarah. And with The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1976, Eastwood doubled down, delivering a film steeped in personal themes of loss, betrayal, and survival. In many ways, Two Mules for Sister Sarah became a turning point. It was the moment Eastwood realized he could no longer be content playing roles in someone else's narrative. If he wanted to tell the kind of stories that mattered to him, stripped down, brutal, morally ambiguous tales about men grappling with violence and identity, he would have to take the reins himself. And that's exactly what he did. To this day, Eastwood steadfastly refuses to rewatch Two Mules for Sister Sarah. In interviews and retrospectives, the film is conspicuously absent, where he speaks fondly of Leone's spaghetti westerns or Siegel's later collaborations. Two Mules is a ghost, a blemish in an otherwise illustrious career. Eastwood's silence is as telling as any confession. Away from the cameras, Eastwood's personal life proved no less complicated than his on-screen characters. His marriage to Maggie Johnson in 1953 endured for over 3 decades, but it was strained by Eastwood's long string of affairs. Among the most notable was Roxanne Tunis, a stuntwoman with whom Eastwood fathered a daughter, Kimber, in 1964. The relationship remained secret for years, with Kimber's existence carefully shielded from the public eye. In the mid-1970s, Eastwood entered a high-profile relationship with actress Sandra Locke. For over 14 years, they lived together, worked together, and became one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples. But behind closed doors, Eastwood was involved with other women, fathering several more children. Locke's later memoir, The Good, the Bad, and the Very Ugly, painted a damning portrait of Eastwood as manipulative and unfaithful, and their acrimonious split marked a turning point in how the public perceived the seemingly untouchable icon. Subsequent affairs produced more children, Scott and Catherine with flight attendant Jocelyn Reeves in the 1980s, and Francesca with actress Frances Fisher in the early 1990s. In 1996, Eastwood married news anchor Dinah Ruiz, and they welcomed a daughter, Morgan. For a time, the family presented a harmonious front, even starring in a reality show. But by 2013, Eastwood and Dinah separated, and their divorce was finalized the following year. Through it all, Eastwood remained an enigma, a man of few words, a libertarian-leaning individualist who served as mayor of Carmel by the Sea in the 1980s, a relentless filmmaker whose artistic ambition never waned. And yet, for all his accolades, his Academy Awards, his AFI Lifetime Achievement Honor, his French Legion of Honor distinction, Two Mules for Sister Sarah remains a ghost at the feast. A project that evokes creative regret, personal discomfort, and an unwelcome reminder of a time when Clint Eastwood was not yet master of his destiny. What makes this omission all the more intriguing is Eastwood's reputation for facing down even the most difficult chapters of his life with stoic resolve. He's revisited the toughest themes in his work: the cost of violence, the hollowness of revenge, the burden of legacy, often using his own experiences as fuel for his storytelling. In Unforgiven, he dissected the myths of the Old West. In Gran Torino, he grappled with mortality, prejudice, and redemption. Time and again, Eastwood has confronted the darkest corners of the American psyche and his own personal history. And yet, Two Mules for Sister Sarah remains the unmentionable. Some film historians and close industry observers speculate that the film represents more than just a troubled shoot or an artistic disappointment. It embodies a moment when Eastwood felt powerless, boxed in by a studio system that didn't yet trust him, working alongside a co-star whose methods undermined his own, directed by a man who, though later a trusted collaborator, failed to capture Eastwood's vision on this early outing. It wasn't merely a bad experience, it was an identity crisis in real form. Even in the carefully curated career, retrospectives and coffee table biographies that chronicle Eastwood's 6-decade reign over American cinema, Two Mules for Sister Sarah is either footnoted or omitted entirely. Film festivals, DVD collections, and streaming retrospectives rarely include it. Eastwood himself has, by most accounts, refused to even discuss it in any substantive way since the early 1970s. It stands not just as a blemish in a glittering career, but as a quiet, stubborn reminder of the battles every legend must fight before they can seize control of their narrative and write their own legend in full.